Hello everyone, Sanjay here. So this video is purely about how you can use Ayaka's mechanics and the way she moves and also her passives and stuff like that to maximize her damage based on your case personally. So you do not need to have a specific weapon for this build, you do not need to have a specific, you do need to have a specific artifact set, but that's completely free to play and you can get that. But you do not need the specific weapon or a specific constellation. So C0 with a 3-star weapon even is workable for this case, but this focuses more on DPS playstyle and mechanics that helps you output more damage. And in the end, there will also be a section dedicated purely to team comps recommendations. So let's first get started with her playstyle. So for playstyle and overall feel, I'll also touch on them differently between open world, domains, and abyss, because open world is very easy, domains is a little bit harder, and abyss currently is the hardest content. So for the first one, playstyle, of course, Ayaka is a field standing DPS. However, unlike Eula, most of her damage comes from her burst. So this makes it very important that you do get Ayaka's energy recharge to a point where you can get her burst pretty easily, basically every 20 seconds. So personally for C0 Ayaka, at least with my build, it feels it's kind of harder to kill mobs without the use of burst, so it do take longer if you just auto attack and charge attack a lot. However, as soon as you get the burst going on, the mobs started getting shred away very easily. That's basically at least my personal feel for how the play has been. And after yesterday's live stream where I pulled Ayaka, I have been trying her out for the rest of the day in order to get this guide out. So because also the other stuff with open world is, and to some extent domains, is because her ult will kill a lot of mobs and also damage mobs at the same time, which will recover a huge amount of energy particles for you. So unless you're specifically in the abyss, there isn't really a need to consider an energy recharge option for her. Like, she just covers for herself more than okay most of the time, and if not, bring a cryo support and you should be completely covered for most of the situations. So first of all, let's talk about the open world. So her burst seems too strong compared to open world enemies, up to the point where a single burst can normally get rid of them pretty easily. And in combination with the sub DPS, the damage is more than enough for you to go through the open world just fine. Yesterday I was killing mobs left and right with a level 60 Ayaka, and that was perfectly fine in terms of damage. Dash wise, her dash is special. Anyone who has never used Mona's dash needs to get used to it. It can get stuck in weird places in the open world just randomly. Like sometimes if you go up a set of stairs, you think it'll be fine and it gets stuck halfway through the stairs. I don't know how exactly it works, but sometimes you just get stuck. However, the biggest advantage is she can travel through water faster and more effectively, and the bigger advantage over Mona is that she can stop halfway through and keep going, whereas Mona, if you stop halfway through, you have to swim the rest of the way. And also be mentioning a tip later how you can travel indefinitely on water, just endlessly with the combination of her freezing effects, and I'll talk about that in the skill analysis section where I talk about dash. So the only thing I have about domain is that a decently built Ayaka in a good team should generally be able to finish enemies within 1 to 2 ult in the domains, and if that is still not enough, then auto should be very easy to clean up the rest. Like, as I've said, domains are not particularly difficult at the moment, or at least endgame players. So if you have a level 90 Ayaka, 1 to 2 ult plus like a few supports is enough, more than enough to clear any domain. And finally, her thing about Abyss. In Abyss, currently her performance is very well. She is doing very well, mostly because she can, like Gangyu, she can handle both the Abyss Lector and the Abyss Herald together. And on top of that, she can apply cryo faster than Gangyu, which means less time needed to clear out the entire full shield of those two enemies. Also, her burst in combination with support burst can pretty much clear out most of the enemies, or at least speeds up the cleaning time by quite a bit. I'll also explain this later in my team comp section, which is dedicated to Abyss. And finally, the next Abyss cycle is designed with her in mind, so not only will her benefit a lot from the next Abyss cycle, Gangyu will also benefit a lot from the next Abyss cycle. So personally, my guess is that her usage for the Abyss will probably be definitely top 8, or maybe even top 5 or 6. Now, of course, the top 3 is always Zhongli, Venti, and Gangyu. No one can pretty much take that. But other than that, she might be within the next 3 spots in terms of Abyss usage. So now we will go over her skills. I won't explain the skills because if you're watching this video, I assume you know how her skill works. However, I will be explaining how you can maximize each of the skill for more damage or more utility or just more benefits in general. So let's start with her dash. Her dash actually has quite a bit to talk about. So the first part is it's basically Mona's dash, except after you comes out of cryo, you apply nearby enemies with cryo, and if you come out of water, then a cryo platform is created for you to stand on initially. The second part is the 10 cost stamina. The actual good thing about her is after you push her to level 70, the 10 cost stamina which gets netted to 0 because of her passive 2. Her passive 2 basically gives you back 10 stamina whenever you comes out of Cryo Infusion as long as you have enemies nearby, and it also gives you a cryo damage bonus when after you come out of the dash if you are hitting enemies again. So basically for this, because Cryo Sword Infusion is every 5 seconds, so what you can do is after about 5 seconds is up, when you see you are no longer infused, you dash in, you dash out, you net 0 stamina lost. On top of that, you gain a cryo damage bonus and Cryo Infusion yet again. Because the fact that the dash has no cooldown other than stamina, so she can technically have 100% uptime for Cryo Sword Infusion, which is better than Kachin, because for Kachin's case, if you're building Electro Kachin, you still have a few seconds of downtime where you end up doing physical damage. Finally, if you move around, the stamina will cost 15, her dash will cost 15 stamina per second. That's just a stat there. And lastly, her dash is not considered a sprint in the sense that her dash will not gain any benefit from the passives of like Kaya or Kazuha where you consume less stamina while you're sprinting. And on top of that, any food that buffs stamina or any food that buffs sprinting speed or stamina consumption, she will not be able to benefit from them. However, she will be benefit from anything that is related to movement speed increase in general. So basically treat her dash kind of like a gliding mechanic, in the sense that anything that buffs the speed of gliding mechanic will also buff the speed of her dash. However, her dash is not a gliding mechanic, just join the parallel there. So basically passives like Rosaria's passive she will definitely be able to take advantage of, and she'll be able to use it. Finally, coming to the tip that you all have been waiting for endless travel on water. So there is a video clip playing in the background. Basically what you do is after you have to come out of water when you have about 1 to 2 seconds left before you completely run out of stamina. So I would recommend coming out when you have about 30 stamina left. And after you come out, immediately auto attack on water. This is very important because the initial platform she creates has the same cooldown as Ganyu's charge attack in terms of when the ice immediately melts away. So you have to immediately attack because the cryo platform she creates from attack, her E, her Q, basically anything other than her dash lasts way longer than the cryo platform created by her dash. So you want to attack immediately, so you swap the quick melt platform into one that is more permanent. And after you do this, you basically continue up with 2 entire cycles of auto attack, so 10 attacks in total. And after you do that, you should have most of the stamina generated. However, if you still need a little bit more, follow it up with a E, which gives you a bit longer time, so you can stand on the ice for about a second. And after which, you should have very close to fully regenerated stamina, so you can just keep going again. This will work 100% of the time. With the only exception is that sometimes because of the animation, you might come out in front of the ice. If that happens, immediately climb onto the ice and follow up with auto attack. You should have enough time for that. So that's basically how you travel endlessly on water with Ayaka. Finally, I want to talk about her Cryo Infusion, which is the main part of her dash when it comes to damage on field. So when she is in battle, of course, her dash will infuse her sword with cryo every 5 seconds. So basically every single time you dash, you come out, her sword will be infused for 5 seconds. Again, as I said before, because dash has no cooldown, this essentially means 100% uptime, or very close to 100% uptime. Theoretically, if nothing goes wrong, her Cryo Infusion can support exactly 2 cycles of auto attacks. So as I've said before, same reason as why you're doing 2 cycles of auto attacks when you're water traveling, her Cryo Sword can support up to 2 cycles of auto attacks, which means each cycle of 5 hits is only about 2.5 seconds. However, because her 5th hit damage multiplier is not very impressive compared to the rest, and also because of the fact her charge attack's damage multiplier is very impressive compared to the rest. So what you normally want to do is 4 auto followed by 1 charge attack. But the problem comes with that because charge attack's animation is much longer than the animation of the 5th attack. So in return, overall, you do have to give up 1 attack. So the overall output method will be 4 auto attacks followed by a charge attack, then followed by 3 more auto attacks and a charge attack. So that entire cycle added together should be again about exactly 5 seconds, just enough for the cryo infusion time to be over. Next, moving on to her charge attacks. There's also quite a bit to talk about her charge attacks. First of all is how to animation cancel. Basically, as soon as you see the sword flashes to start forming, so basically as soon as she starts pulling her sword back and the sword slashes start forming away from her, then you can immediately jump out by either dashing or jumping. And after that happens, it gives you like 0.1 second more time so you can jump to DPS. However, it is not really important. However, it is a good time-saving mechanic if you're someone who's really into, more DPS window. Then this is a mechanic to use. However, for normal people, you don't really have to take advantage of it, but just do note that you do have to use this sometimes, because if a mob is attacking you after her charge attack, Ayaka is very vulnerable to attacks if you don't quickly dash out or anything. So it is a good mechanic to master. However, it is not necessary in most situations. The second one is that at the beginning of the charge attack as well, Ayaka is very vulnerable to attacks because she has to pull her sword out and push it back, and then the sword slashes form. So during her pulling out and pulling back in form, then she is very vulnerable to attacks. So you do also want to make sure that you do have enough time to go through the animation of the charge attack without getting hit by enemies. Finally, regarding the actual mechanics of charge attack, funny enough, her charge attack can actually auto-target enemies. Basically, here is exactly how it works. I'll use my very good skill of Microsoft Paint drawing here to illustrate. So basically, her charge attack has a range. Anyone that has played Ayaka probably noticed this. And the range is actually stationary. It will be the same range always. However, the actual location of the charge attack, so the animation will always appear on the same range. However, the actual location of the charge attack depends on which mob is closest to you within a 3D area. So basically, it auto calculates all the distance of the mobs away from you. It chooses the closest one, and that one will be the center of the charge attack. The charge attack itself is actually AoE, and the range of the AoE is a sphere around the center of the attack, which is the closest mob to you. And the range of the AoE is the same range between Ayaka and her charge attack sword slashes. So basically, which means in the following scenario, if you have a mob right in your face, 2 mobs behind you slightly further away, if you charge attack, the charge attack will auto lock onto the mob that's directly in your face. However, it will also be able to hit the 2 mobs slightly behind you, because the charge attack is AoE range, so it hits 360 degree. Unlike, I think Kajin's attack only hits 180 degree, what's everything in front of you. However, for Ayaka's case, she can hit 360. So if mobs are really close to you, you don't have to worry about the mobs behind you attacking, because the charge attack will be able to hit them. Finally, one good thing about Ayaka, her charge attack will be able to hit the enemies within Venti's Q. So that is a good thing, because previously Venti's Q is getting complained for some DPSs cannot hit Venti's Q. So Ayaka can do that with her charge attack, which again means more DPS window when Venti's Q is up. Next, let's move on to her elemental skill, and I'll go through elemental burst after that. So for her elemental skill, the damage is okay. It's not the most impressive, of course. However, the damage is also quite nice for the timing, for the rate it has. The cooldown is a little bit on the longer side, mostly because her elemental skill does also generate quite a bit of energy particles and also gives you a buff after you use it, both of which I'll talk about later. And for damage wise, they can actually knock back the smallest group of mobs. So Samatrolls, Helitrolls, basically the human sized mobs. Anything bigger, the charge attack will not be able to do anything. The elemental skill will not be able to do anything to it. The animation for the starting of the elemental skill is rather long. It's actually already shortened. She used to actually spin around, which makes it even longer. However, the good thing is there is absolutely no lag as soon as the elemental skill ends. So you can dash away as soon as the elemental skill ends and go back to DPS. The same problem as charge attack, during the initial animation you can get stopped by mobs. However, it's not a major problem because the timing is not that long, so as long as you keep in mind that no mobs are near or attacking you while you do your E, you should be fine. And also energy particle wise, as promised before, it generates 5 energy particles for every single time you use it. So basically means if you're talking about 130% energy recharge, you'll get full after 4 uses. Now of course you don't exactly have to use elemental skill as the only source of energy recharge. Her main source of energy recharge will probably from either damaging mobs or killing mobs, because she's so good at AoE that she'll be able to do that with a bunch of them. So that will probably be her main source of energy particle, but E is just like a nice bonus on top in terms of energy charge, in terms of energy particles. Also, as promised before, the elemental skill also works with her passive 1, which buffs her auto and charge attack by 30% more damage for a 6-second duration after she uses her E. So compared in conjunction with the previous one where she buffs her cryo damage bonus after using her dash, this is how you're supposed to output damage with her. Of course, this is the theoretical best way of outputting. You don't have to master this at all, it just means more damage. And also overall, this is 100% not necessary unless you're like trying to clear the abyss, 3-star everything. Even with that, with a higher build Ayaka, this is not 100% necessary. So what you want to do first, you want to dash, so you get the Cryo Infusion and the cryo damage bonus. Then you follow up with the E, so you get normal and charge attack damage bonus. Then you start the full auto combo, then follow into a charge attack. If you have time, do cancel out of that animation, do animation cancel out of that charge attack with a dash. Then you follow up with 4 more auto attacks and a charge attack. Then the cycle just goes on. So into dash, 4 auto attacks, charge attacks, 3 autos, charge attacks, then the cycle just goes on. Again, theoretically this is the most useful way to output damage, but practically, because for open world and domains you don't really, the time restriction isn't really a thing, so you don't really need to use this. Like, you have all the time in the world to kill all the mobs you want, so you don't really need this. Again, this is for people who want to maximize her damage. For Elemental Burst, it's going to be Ayaka's main source of damage. There are 20 hits in total. The first 19 hits are considered the cutting damage. If you look at the damage numbers for her ult, you can see that the first line is cutting damage and the second line is bloom damage. So the all first 19 hits of the 20 hits are considered cutting damage, and the last hit is considered bloom damage. So overall in total at level 6, we're looking at 3219% damage multiplier, which is insane. Another thing to note is after casting her burst will move forward if there are no enemies in the way until the burst ends. However, if there are enemies in the way, it basically goes through a somewhat complex loop to determine whether it goes forward or stays stationary. So if the enemy, I have created a flowchart here that kind of helps you solve the situation. So you can screenshot it if you want to. So if the enemy is big, then it has a deciding factor to consider. The deciding factor is tenacity. If you underworld, tenacity is like a hidden HP bar for the enemies. Now of course for the lava trolls, the tenacity bar is actually just the shield bar up there. So once their shield is done, you notice sometimes they get knocked back when you're attacking them, with Claymore of course. So that is essentially when their tenacity is down. But for other mobs, you don't see the tenacity bar, so you have to guess when their tenacity is down. But basically, whenever you can knock them back, it means their tenacity bar is currently down at the moment. So if the tenacity bar is down, you have a 2-second window before the tenacity bar completely resets. During that 2-second window, if you cast your ult, the burst will stay stationary with the mobs because their tenacity bar is done, which means if you do that, you'll be able to get all 20 hits. By the way, for the rest of here, you always want the ult to stay stationary. And if the enemy is big and the tenacity bar is still up, then it will attempt to stop at the enemy. However, it won't be able to do that, so it slowly moves through the enemy, which means you do get most of the hit. However, you do not get the entire duration of the 20 hits, which is less damage. And finally, under all situations, if the enemy is frozen or petrified, no matter if it's big or small, as long as you can freeze it or petrify it, the burst will always stay near the petrified or frozen enemy and give you all 20 stacks. So overall, this is why permafreeze is so strong with Ayaka, because it essentially allows you to hit all 20 stacks at almost all times with her burst, and the burst being her main source of other damage, then this means more damage for Ayaka. So basically the point of the previous flowchart being, if you're not playing in permafreeze comp or you're unable to permafreeze enemy, always hit down their tenacity bars before you use your ult, otherwise you're losing potential damage. The range of the ult is basically the animation range. So if you see an animation of the ult overlapping with the enemy, good chances the enemy is taking damage from the animation, which is much better than Venti's case, because for Venti the burst looks very fancy, but the actual range is only the place in the middle. However, speaking of Venti, Ayaka's ult does work with Venti's ult, so you can easily, if you have Venti, you can easily get these two up for a easy debuff, freezing, and damage at the same time, which added together, these two's ult is enough to take over most mobs in most situations. And finally, how to buff the actual damage of Ayaka's Qs through basically mechanicking and maneuvers. So her Q follows the Snapshot Mechanic. If you're unaware of the Snapshot Mechanic, it is basically the damage, the buffs applied to the ult is calculated the moment the ult is cast. So basically, for example, if Bennett's ult is up, you are standing in Bennett's ult, you're gaining attack buff, and then you use your ult, you use Ayaka's Q. However, even if Bennett's Q disappears while Ayaka's Q is still going, but because of the Snapshot Mechanic, it is considered that Ayaka's Q is buffed by Bennett's Q for the entire duration. And this is what you want to take advantage of. So first, again, you want to dash into enemy, because you want to do that so that you gain the crowd damage bonus. However, you want to immediately Q. There is no need for E here. But if you're using the Mist Splitter, you do want to attack once to get one of the stacks, and then you want to follow by Q. Always cast your Q first, followed by your E, never the other way around, because your E buffs auto and charge attacks. However, if while you're casting your Q, you do have a few seconds of downtime while the Q animation is playing, which means less time for your auto and charge attack buffs. Whereas if you do it the other way around, Q first, then followed by E, there is no problem at all. So basically what you do is you dash into the enemy, start with your Q, followed by your E, then re-dash to animation cancel, then you follow up with a set of 4 auto attacks into a charge attack. Then you follow up with an animation cancel, as previously stated before. You don't really have to do that, but animation cancel makes it faster. Then you auto attack 4 again into charge attack, and after that you can go back to your normal 2 cycle of 4 auto attacks into charge, followed by 3 auto attacks into charge, then dash cycle. So that is basically all the ways to DPS with Ayaka if she is the solo DPS on the field, which means the rest of your teammates, either their E or their Q are down, or they do not need to be on the field right now, then this is how you output damage with Ayaka. However, for more complex methods, I'll talk about them later in the team comp section. So that is section 5. The next 2 sections will be artifacts and weapon choices. For artifacts, I will only be recommending the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer because of the permafreeze comp. However, if you're building a hybrid build with 2-piece Glad, if you're building a hybrid build with 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Blizzard, or if you're going with any other comp, then this isn't really the correct video for you. However, if you're building with the hybrid build of 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Blizzard, or 2-piece something 2-piece Blizzard, just make sure you have enough crit rate, and everything that applies to this can also apply to that build as well. However, for the other builds like melt builds, this section does not apply at all. So for her, again, for 4-piece Blizzard Strayer, for the main stats, you want attack percent on stance with the secondary of energy recharge if you really need that. However, attack is the best. crowd damage bonus on her cup or her goblet, and most of the time you want critical damage bonus on her circlet. Now of course, if you're really lacking crit rate and you have no crit rate within the substats, having a crit rate circlet is fine. However, in most cases, the substats rolling is enough to cover up for about 30% crit rate, which is all she needs. So after which, all you need to do is stack on as much critical damage as possible. Now of course, if you are using the black sword or the jade cutter, then there is no need to stack on crit rate at all. Then just, if you're using any of those weapons, straight up go for crit damage. And for substats wise, you want to crit damage first, followed by crit rate, then you want attack percent, and you want the sprinkling of ER somewhere here and there. But for crit rate, you always want to make sure you have around a minimum of 30% crit rate. And after that, the rest is good enough. Because the Blizzard Strayer with a 4-piece permafreeze set is able to give you 40% crit rate by itself with permafreeze again. So that goes up to 70%, which is good enough for most situations with Ayaka. Finally, moving on to the weapons before the actual team comp recommendation. For the weapons, as you can see, everything is here. So this is taken from NGA Malpass. He is one of the Chinese spellability persons, and this is his calculation. So how you read this graph is the percentage here is actually the percentage of damage less than compared to R1 Mist Splitter. So as you can see, the entire R1 Mist Splitter section is 0. And on top of that, any of the negative percentage here is actually means it deals more damage than Mist Splitter. So overall, I mean, you can look at the graph yourself, but overall for summarization purposes, basically for 5 stars, Mist Splitter is still the king, and followed closely by Summit Shaper, assuming Summit Shaper can achieve full shield coverage, which is a bit difficult. So if Summit Shaper cannot achieve full shield coverage, Mist Splitter is still the best one. Jade Cutter is good if you have it, but the crit rate tends to overflow because 40% crit rate already, and also 40 on top for the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer is 80, and then normally you can easily get 20 or more from substats, which means a lot of time you'll be overflowing with permanent crit rate builds. However, which means it's less damage on the crit damage side of things and stuff like that. However, it's a good 5-star overall. Skyward Blade is actually a decent choice if you factor in the ER calculation, the energy recharge calculation. So it is actually a decent choice. Aquila Favonia is the worst among the 5 stars, of course, because for physical damage bonus. However, the passive makes it still very usable for most 4 stars. It makes it still better than most 4 stars. So if you have Aquila, it is still better than most 4 stars in terms of damage. 4 stars, Black Cliff Longsword is going to be the strongest because of the crit damage passive. However, if you're looking at all 3 stacks maxed out, and on top of that an R5, then you can match the damage of the Summit Shaper. However, practically that is impossible to achieve, so that just puts Black Cliff Longsword at the best spot for 4 stars. Black Sword, its counterpart, is also a very good choice. The crit rate is about the amount you just want. The crit damage, but damage wise, it will not be as impressive as the Black Cliff Longsword because it's stacking on crit rate, not crit damage. And the new craftable weapon, I mean, here's the actual name. This is a new craftable weapon. It's actually around the same level as these two if you factor in the energy recharge. So this is why for 4 stars, I will recommend instead of having specifically building one, you can just use whichever one if you already have them built. If you have none of them built, just use whichever one you have on hand at the moment, because all 3 does about the same amount of damage overall. For 3 stars, Harbinger of Dawn is okay if you actually use it. However, that is assuming you have the passive open at all times, which means you need to be above 90% HP at all times. So you better have a very tanky Diona shield, or otherwise it's very easy for Harbinger to lose its passive, and once it loses its passive, there's no point using Harbinger of Dawn anymore. So overall conclusion, for 5 stars, Mist Splitter is greater than Summit Shaper, is greater than Jade Cutter, is greater than Skyward Sword, is greater than Aquila Favonia. And for 4 stars, Black Cliff Longsword, Black Sword, and the new craftable sword, use whichever one you have handy. Finally, moving on to Ayaka's weapon choice, Ayaka's team comps. So for all these team comps are mostly focused for Abyss again, and all of these team comps are variations of the permafreeze team comp for Ayaka. Again, for open world and domains, you can brute force with almost any team comp, so there is no need to recommend team comps. So let's start with the basic team comp, and I'll go through all the variations later. We have 4.5 variations in total with one of the base, so 6 team comps in total. So the base team comp is of course Ayaka, Xingqiu, Venti, and Diona. And the pattern will follow for the rest of the team comps. So it will always be Ayaka plus 1 Hydro support plus 1 Anemo support plus 1 Cryo support. Hydro in this case is more of a DPS. So for the actual output method, when you want to deal with Abyss, is you want to start with Diona's E into Diona's Q. Diona's E is for shielding purposes, so you want to hold the E in this case for the longer shield. So once the shield is up, you can basically avoid getting interrupted when you're cycles through the rest of the team comp output. And for Q, it's for constant cryo application, which means as soon as Xingqiu's E and Q hits, it's freezing already. For Xingqiu, you want to start up, so after Diona, you want to switch to Xingqiu. For Xingqiu, you want to start with up with the E followed by a Q. Again, of course, if you're using Saxor, you can follow up with E, Q, E, so in that case you get more energy, but it's not necessary. After that, you want to auto attack at least once to trigger the Hydro Sword, which of course is frozen right away. So once the enemy is frozen, you want to swap to Venti to use his E. Just tap is enough, no need to hold. Venti's E is strong Anemo, which means it triggers double swirl. Double swirl essentially means it swirls both Hydro and Cryo. In this case, it lowers both Hydro and Cryo resistance, which is very good. After this, the enemy might be unfrozen or something might happen, so which means you need to refreeze them again. So to do that, you dash in with Ayaka. Or you can, if you're already close enough to the enemy, you can just tap dash with Ayaka, and after you come out of the ground with Ayaka, follow up with an auto attack. Because it's already Cryo Infused, you should be able to very easily freeze the enemy again. Once the enemy is frozen, you start up with your Q, which that is the main source of damage for this entire output. And after that is done, you go back to the normal attacking sequence, which is if you have E, there is a different attacking sequence. If you do not have E, which is dash around due to cycles of auto attacks and dash around again. So this one is very good in terms of Abyss build. However, the main problem with this one is that it's kind of Q heavy. So basically, if you're not able to completely clear this floor after you have gone through this entire setup, then you are forced to enter the auto attack stage, which means you are forced to enter the stage where you keep switching between characters for their E to charge up their Q, and also on top of that you need to constantly swap into Ayaka to do auto attacks to finish up. However, this should have enough damage to take out most of the HP bar of the enemies nearby, if not all. Now of course, for special ones like Abyss Herald and Abyss Lector, this might not apply. You still need to go through their shield, but other than that, this one should be able to take care of most enemies, and if not, this one should be able to do a big chunk of the damage in terms of their HP. So a few good things about this comp. It's overall very good because freeze means very good for control, which means there is basically no interruption while doing this comp. Even if Diona's shield is not up later on, because enemies are frozen at all times, you can pretty much be very active when it comes to dealing damage instead of very passive and dodging around. And on top of that, this comp provides a constant flow of energy recharge because everyone has very short cooldown in terms of E and Q. So if you need a specific set of energy particles, just swap to the corresponding character, provide E and Q. Now of course, Xingqiu is an exception here, but Xingqiu, if you're using a Sax Sword, then he should have enough energy recharge to cover for himself. Now finally, a few things to remember. Frequently swap to Xingqiu for freezing effect if needed. Venti is there more to just lower the res of the Hydro and Cryo res of enemies, and Diona is there for shield purposes, and Diona and Xingqiu can serve as a healer in a pinch. So this is the base form of this comp. Now let's talk about the first variation, which I like to call the buff variation, which essentially you swap out Xingqiu with Mona. So in this case, instead of having Xingqiu as a sub DPS, you're having Mona to further buff Ayaka's Q. So compared to the comp before, this one's advantage is more damage on Ayaka's Q. However, the disadvantage is that if you're unable to take away the enemy within this first set of combos, during the auto attacking phase, it is harder to keep up with freezing enemies, because Mona, you do need to actually switch to Mona to attack. Instead, Xingqiu just goes off field and attacking. So the output method is exactly the same. However, the only thing you want to do is you want to swap the difference between Venti and Mona. So in this case, you want to start with Ayaka, immediately go to Venti, then go to Mona, and finally end up with Ayaka. The reason you want to do that is because Mona's bubbles needs to be saved for Ayaka, so which is in this case you do not want Venti to break Mona's bubbles and also mess up the order. And also Mona's buff and is also need to be saved for Ayaka, which is why you need to wait for Mona to be just before Ayaka instead of before Venti. And finally, because Ayaka is doing most of the damage in this one, so Mona can actually use Dragon Slayers, the Thrilling Tale of Dragon Slayers, to further buff Ayaka's damage. Finally, let's talk about the Kazuha version of this kit. So this one focuses even more on buff as well. However, this one has a specialization for big mobs, which is the later floors of the Abyss, except I believe floor 12. So for floor 11, like the bigger mobs, this comp will be better. Now, of course, if you don't have Kazuha, Venti is just fine. Venti will do the job just fine. Kazuha is a bit more favored in the Abyss right now, but that is still okay. So for this comp, again, it is a similar situation. All I have to talk about is Kazuha's output damage will have to be a little bit different. But other than that, if you're using Shinchu, go with Diona, Shinchu into Kazuha, then finally Ayaka. And if you're using Mona, go Diona, Kazuha, followed by Mona, and finally Ayaka. And as for the damage pattern, it's exactly the same. So Diona E into Q, Shinchu E into Q, into E again. If you have Sacrificial Swords, then auto trigger Water Swords. Kazuha is a little bit different. Kazuha, you want to start with Q, then immediately follow up with auto to trigger Water Swords again. And after that, you want to hold your E. Make sure you hold, do not tap. Then followed by the plunge attack combo, then trigger Water Swords again with auto attack. The reason you want to do Q first was to reduce the tenacity of the enemies. So when you're doing the hold E into charge attack combo, it gathers the enemy much better because their tenacity bar is down, which means they can get moved around. And finally, you want to hold your E because if you tap your E, it's weak Anemo. If you hold your E, it's strong Anemo. You want strong Anemo here to trigger double swirl. Now, of course, if you're having Mona here, there's no point. You can just tap your E. It is fine. And finally, if you have Mona, use Mona here to buff. And if you don't have Mona, you already use Shinchu as the second person. So finally, if you don't have Mona, swap to Ayaka. If you have Mona, swap to Ayaka. Ayaka do the same method of dashing in and auto attacking with Water Sword to make sure it's frozen, and once the enemy is frozen, go with your Q, and once your Q is up, you can move again, then start with your E into dash into auto attack again. So that is going back to the solo DPS cycles again. So finally, talking about the most free to play version of this buff, of this team comp, you can swap out Mona for Shinchu, of course, because Shinchu is a 4-star, and you can swap out Venti / Kazuha with Bennett. Now, this is going to be less damage than the previous versions, of course, because this one does not deal with Swirl at all. Like, Bennett is only there to buff Ayaka's ult, as previously stated with the Snapshot Mechanic. However, this is still workable, very workable for Ayaka. And the reason why I bring Bennett here is his Q actually doesn't really apply any pyro, so as long as he doesn't use his E, you're fine bringing Bennett, even though he's a pyro character. So same output damage as before, you start with Diona, moving on to Shinchu, and then all you need to do instead of Venti and Kazuha is you just Bennett comes in, drop his Q, leaves, and then Ayaka come in, do the dash into frozen into Q attack again. And finally, this is the most expensive comp. This is the completely pay to win comp, which is Ayaka, Mona, Kazuha, and Ganyu. This comp has no healer because it doesn't need to. This comp can pretty much take out most mobs in the Abyss within this entire cycle. Basically, you go exactly the same as everyone. So Ganyu E into Q, then follow quickly up with Kazuha. Kazuha only needs to do Q into auto into charge attack here, and after that you need to do Mona to apply the buff. Mona can also wear Swirling Tails here, and Ayaka's Q to finally take everything out. The good thing here is Ganyu's Q actually provides a 20% extra crowd damage bonus for Ayaka, and of course if you have all of them C6, that means even more damage buff on top. So that is all the video I have for you today. I know it's a very long video. I have split into sections, you can look at the different sections. If you have watched all the way till the end, thank you very much. If you like the content, please consider subscribing. Thank you and have a nice day.
outlines your